Next, you'll take your X-Acto, starting at the top of your tail of your center pattern, bring your X-Acto towards you as you cut along the scribed lines of your pattern. You always want to cut towards you. I cut the sides of the center pattern at a slight angle inward. I'll cut the bottom of the pattern at a straight angle. Turning your leather, this allows you to cut down in the fork of the tail or the back of the hood pattern, again pulling your X-Acto towards you. The pressure on the X-Acto is moderate. You don't take or you don't need a lot of pressure to cut through the material. I use my little finger, as you notice, to steady my hand as I am pulling the X-Acto towards me, cutting the material. You should always be careful when you're cutting out corners as not to cut into the material. There's a center piece cut out. Next, you will be cutting out your eyepiece. Cut the bottom with a straight cut. As you start down in the corner, coming up the face, you will want to cut at a slight inward angle. This helps the material come together later when you are stitching it to make the hood. This helps it fit the contour shape of the mold. You want to be precise when you're cutting. It's important that these pieces be cut exactly to the pattern. You have cut out one eye panel. Here what we are doing is pre-cutting the beak hole, and you are very lightly going through the surface of the material. You don't want to cut all the way through. This is just to help you out when in the finishing stages of the hood, after it is dyed and blocked. It's easier to finish the hood by having it pre-cut and measured to where it fits on the face. You will also want to pre-cut the slits in the top of the hood where your Turk's knot will go. Then you will need to cut out your other eye panel, and we can go on to the next step. Next, you will want to cut a thin piece of kangaroo for your neck strap. Cut this approximately 7 inches in length. Here I use the X-Acto chisel blade. This neck piece is the piece that you will be attaching to the bottom of your hood. As you can see here on the bottom of the hood, the neck piece sewn on after it has been dyed and glued and then stitched into the hood. Next, you will want to cut 2 pieces of 3/16 inch calf lace. You can buy most of this material at your local leather store. This is what we make the Turk's knots out of. This will be the last pieces we need before we go on to dyeing. You want to make sure you have all your pieces cut and ready to dye before we go on to the next step. Here we have all the pieces needed to dye and ready to continue. Next, we will want to dye the pieces of the hood. In this case, we're going to dye the centerpiece brown and the eye panels blue, and we will be using the dunk dye method using a vat of Fiebing's dye. The idea here is that kangaroo is so porous that it doesn't matter if you dye it on the one side, it seeps through, so it's best just to saturate the leather. Let it drip dry and then place it on a paper towel or a clean towel, whatever you prefer. Next, you will want to dye your chin strap and 1 piece of the lace you cut for your Turk's knot, so you have coordinating colors when the hood is finished. These should be dipped in for about 20 seconds is all that is necessary to get a nice even dye. One of the purposes I do this is to eliminate any streaking in the dye. Next, you will want to clean off your clamps because we will be changing the color of the dye. Then you will want to dye your eye panels. We are going to be dyeing a blue, a royal blue. This dye is a alcohol based dye, a Tandy Leather Company dye. Again, you just let it sit 15 seconds. Get the excess off and lay it out on the paper towel. You want to be careful when you hold these with your clamps. It will leave some indentations. So what I advise is to place the clamps where the braces will go. It won't be as noticeable if there's any markings left on the hood. You always want to be careful when you're dyeing leather. It has a tendency of getting on pieces of material that's unnecessary. Then you will want to dye the last piece of lace for your Turk's knot. Then lay it out on the paper towel and let all the pieces dry. This section is scribing and marking for your pre-punched holes. Your material should be damp. Do this directly after you have dyed your material or dampen it with a spray bottle. Using your compass, set your gauge at 4 millimeters. Draw your scribe lines down the side, across the bottom, and up the other side of your centerpiece. These markings are the depth in which you will